Welcome to 1 Minute to Midnight. I'm Wilfred Cunningham. On the 23rd of June, the United Kingdom held a referendum in which 51.9% of those who voted opted for the UK to leave the European Union. The result was a surprise to many, in the UK and across the world, with the process of the UK leaving the EU and the immediate future of both unclear. After the results of the vote, British Prime Minister David Cameron announced that he would step down before October, sparking a leadership battle that apparently no one, including those taking part in it, expected. Boris Johnson has been a household name in the UK for more than a decade. He has been a Conservative Minister of Parliament, editor of political magazine The Spectator, and the Mayor of London, and both he and David Cameron, the Conservative Prime Minister, attended Eton, a prestigious private school, and Oxford University, where they were members of the Bullingdon Club, an unofficial and highly selective dining club at Oxford, at the same time. Johnson has long been connected with Cameron, and the two describe themselves as friends, but Johnson has often been assumed by many political commentators to have ambitions to one day hold the premiership himself. This has allegedly been confirmed by Johnson to some journalists close to him, but he has never officially declared an interest and has publicly backed Cameron on many occasions. As the UK's referendum became closer, people began to campaign to leave or remain within the EU, splitting political parties depending on personal choice, notably so the Conservative Party, where there has historically been a division among pro-European and Eurosceptic colleagues. On the 16th of February, Johnson had dinner with Michael Gove, the Secretary of State for Justice, as was reported by Gove's wife and journalist Sarah Vine. Michael Gove has already long been known to favour leaving the EU, but Johnson, according to his own biographer Sonia Purnell, and many who have known him, was at least not totally anti-European and had expressed varied views about the UK's relationship with Europe in the past, but it seems Cameron had expected his support in campaigning to stay. On the 21st of February, Johnson announced he would campaign, alongside Gove, to leave the EU, reportedly telling Cameron of his decision a few minutes before making it public. Many journalists have pointed to the earlier dinner as being the point where Johnson was convinced to campaign to leave.
The last thing I wanted was to go against David Cameron or the government. But after a great deal of hard take, I don't think there's anything else I can do. I will be advocating vote leave or whatever the team is called. I understand there are many of them. I think that is basically because I want a better deal for the people of this country.
Johnson was perhaps much more important to the campaign than Gove or Ian Duncan Smith, another prominent campaigner and one-time leader of the Conservative Party during their time in opposition, as he was well known and well liked by many people, including voters who were not necessarily committed to specific parties. Many doubted Johnson's sincerity in campaigning, with the charge of political opportunism often being levied against him, particularly by those in the Remain campaign, but not exclusively. 2 days before the referendum, Johnson admitted to having written 2 alternative columns for the Daily Telegraph back in February, one arguing for and one arguing against remaining in the EU, showing he was undecided until after the dinner with Gove.
I've been told by someone in a position to know that you wrote 2 articles for the Daily Telegraph, because you knew you had to have an article in the Daily Telegraph on the Monday. One was for staying in, the other was for getting out. And the person who told me this said that the one for staying in was the more persuasive.
Well, on the contrary, the one, I don't know what your conceivable sources for that information may be, but I can tell you seriously that I wrote...
There's a way of helping you make up your mind.
And I'll tell you what the second article said. What it said was that actually, irrespective of my objections to the way the EU was going, in order to support my party and the Prime Minister, it would be better to stay in.
On the night of the referendum, it was reported that 84 MPs, including both Johnson and Gove, had signed a letter to David Cameron asking him to remain Prime Minister after the referendum, regardless of the result. Political commentator Mark Mardell says that sources told him that on the night of the 23rd, both Gove and Johnson retired after the votes started being counted, both with speeches prepared for defeat. It seems neither of them expected to win. After the UK voted to leave the EU, Cameron announced he would step down as Prime Minister and leader of the Conservatives by October, after a leadership election. This might have left the door open for Johnson, seen by many as one of two natural heirs to Cameron, alongside George Osborne, the Chancellor. But Johnson's press conferences were subdued, and many political journalists began to speculate that he hadn't expected, or really wanted, the UK to vote to leave, but instead vote to remain. That result may have seen him propelled to a favourable position of being popular with those who had voted to leave, but also others who had voted to remain, but were disaffected with mainstream politics, allowing him to run for leader after Cameron's intended resignation in 2017 or 18, which Cameron had already announced, before the next scheduled election. That is, of course, speculation, but it does seem that both Johnson and Gove were somewhat unprepared for the referendum's result, and that Johnson, more than Gove, who had been a vocal critic of the EU for all of his political life, was unsure of what it meant for himself politically, or perhaps unsure of the UK's future. On the 26th of June, Johnson's weekly column for the Telegraph was published. It was cautious and lacked any triumphalism, and some accused it of being too soft on the prospects of distancing the UK from the EU. But Gove had seen the column the night before it was published and approved it, or some sources even suggest he co-edited it. At this point, both Johnson and Gove were working together in the wake of Cameron's decision to step down, and it was assumed by the UK press and many inside political circles that Johnson would stand in the contest to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, with Gove's backing. On the 28th, an email from Sarah Vine was leaked, possibly by herself, in which she advised her husband to demand specific benefits for backing Johnson in a leadership contest, or withdraw guarantees of support. That evening, Rupert Murdoch, founder of News Corporation and owner of dozens of newspapers and TV stations across the world, publicly said that he thought Gove was the best potential leader for the Conservatives. On the 30th, shortly after 9 o'clock in the morning, Gove announced he would stand for the leadership.
Boris is a big character with great abilities, and I enjoyed working with him during the referendum campaign, when he campaigned with great energy and enthusiasm. But there is something special about leading a party and leading a country, and I had the opportunity in the last few days to assess whether or not Boris could lead that team and build that unity. And I came, as I say, reluctantly but firmly to the conclusion that while Boris has many talents and attributes, he wasn't capable of building that team. And there were a number of people who had said to me during the course of the week, "Michael, it should be you."
Reportedly, Johnson first heard of this after seeing it in the news, and Gove's announcement is not only seen by many as a surprise, but also as a betrayal. His candidacy denied Johnson a key ally and drained away many MPs who had previously committed to supporting him. At around 11:53, only minutes before nominations closed, Johnson declared he would not run.
My friends, you who have waited faithfully for the punchline of this speech, that having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
Now, Stephen Crabb, Liam Fox, Michael Gove, Andrea Leadsom, and Theresa May, the Home Secretary, are confirmed as the official Tory leadership contenders. Unless Cameron calls a general election before he leaves, one of them will be the next Prime Minister. As for Johnson, on the 4th of July he came out in support of Leadsom. His reputation may have been damaged by the assumption that he supported the Leave campaign purely for his own political gain, but at the same time there is sympathy for him, and he has traditionally been popular with the electorate and the media. Careers in politics can be short, the days and weeks long, but the memories of a traitor may never fade. So, until next time, goodbye, and try to remain calm.